Hopefully my internet and everything will work. And if it
says
doesn't, I will
live.
cry.
Don't worry, it says live.
Hi. Yes, we are live now. We are up. Hi, everybody. This is Dawn Block. I'm with Census 21 First Class Homes. And a couple things I wanted if you have not done the housing coloring contest, please go to Dawn Block Realtor. At the top, you see pinned is my pinned invitation for the coloring contest that I'm doing for Halloween. Please just click on the link, pick out one of the pieces of artwork, color it, take a picture of you and the artwork or just the artwork, but make sure the name is there. And then if you wouldn't mind putting it, just uploading it or putting it in the comments and putting in hashtag Dawn Block Realtor. That way you will be part of the contest and you will be entered in to the drawing that I'll be doing for the Halloween coloring contest. Plus, everybody's a winner. So you'll make sure that I have your address. If you think I don't, please make sure you message me your address because I want to make sure that everybody gets their little gift. So today we are talking about property taxes. And yes, it is a hot topic. A lot of people have tons of questions about it. And what I did was I brought in Ryan Schaefges. He is an attorney, and what he focuses on are appealing taxes. So Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Q&A session. And I would love for you to introduce yourself and a little bit of a background so that our guests can know who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Ryan Schaefges. Hi, everyone, and anyone here. I'm an attorney. I focus on property tax appeals. I have been an attorney for 7 years. I've actually been doing property tax appeals for about 8 years. In the middle of law school, I joined a firm, and that firm was a real estate firm that handled closings and property tax appeals. I ended up working exclusively in the property tax appeals area, and after law school, I graduated, I became an attorney, jumped in that firm again and worked there as an attorney. And then a couple years after that, the firm kind of dissolved and I went off on my own. I've been on my own doing property tax appeals for 4 years. I work on any property type anywhere in the state of Illinois. And I try to help everyone understand the clear as mud system of property taxes in Illinois. So that's what I'm here to do, to try to help out as best I can, answer any questions, and make sure everyone has a fair assessment, has the exemptions they're entitled to, and understands the process the whole way through.
Great. Ryan, could you please let everybody know how they can get in touch with you if they have any questions?
If anyone has questions, they can, my phone number, I believe, is scrolling on the bottom, and it's 847-403-1830. It's going to come up in a second here, but you can call or text that number, and I respond to, usually, if I don't answer the phone, I'll get back to you shortly. You can text as well. And then my email is right there, ryan@schaefgeslaw.com. You can email me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have if we don't get to them here.
Great, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be starting out with some questions, but just to kind of do a little bit of house cleaning here, if you put a comment below, and let's say I don't get it because of technical difficulties, because that can happen, I will make sure that Ryan gets the question, we get an answer to that question, and I will then post it back in the comments of our feed after we are done with the Q&A session. So if anybody, and too, just to let everybody know, this is streaming on Facebook, on my business page, my regular feed, and YouTube channel. Plus, also, we have it going on Twitter right now. So I just wanted to let everybody know that too. So, and then after this is done, you can always come back and listen to it, and just go to Dawn Block Realtor, and you will look to see for the video with this interview on it right now. In the feed of my business page. So why don't we start with the first question? Okay, so it says, if you sent an appeal, when can you expect to get a response, Ryan?
So that's a great question, though unfortunately the answer is hilarious because it depends. If we're talking in Cook County and you sent in an appeal, right now they're running from, let's say, I'll take the most recent townships. They're running about 3 months, I would say, 2 to 3 months on a decision. And so that's kind of what the assessor usually does. However, in the collar counties, it's very different. In collar counties, if you appeal in DuPage County, if you appeal, they issue all their decisions at once, and those decisions are issued typically in February. Most of the collar counties, McHenry, Lake, DuPage, Kane, will issue decisions in a block for all appeals this year. They issue them in one block, typically the first quarter next year.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good information. I did have a question, and this might be just somebody being funny. It says, why do you pay for something that you own? Let's show this one here. Yeah, this is it. He says, why do you pay for something that you own?
Well, we have our in Illinois, we fund our schools through a property tax, and so every year 2/3 or so of your property tax bill goes to fund your school, the county, and the city, your libraries, your forest preserves, all those sorts of things, roads, that sort of fun stuff. Mostly your schools, though. That's it, and that's the social contract we've all agreed to.
Okay, well, that's great. That was a question. Thank you so much for your question, viewer. It says, the next question that I have down here, it says, how do taxes on the home compare to other properties in an area?
So, houses, I'm assuming that means like houses to businesses. In Cook County, houses are assessed at 10% of their market value. Okay. And so if a house is worth $200,000, the assessed value is $20,000. In Cook County, commercial properties are assessed at 25% of their market value. So a $200,000 commercial property would be assessed at $50,000. And so their tax bill, that's the start of your tax bill. And so that's the way the assessment works. That's only in Cook County. In every other county in the state of Illinois, all properties are assessed at 1/3 of market value.
Oh, okay. All right. So are there exemptions to or assistance for property taxes?
Absolutely. There's both exemptions and assistance. Assistance can vary widely depending on the year. They offered COVID relief this year. Every county handled it different. Cook County just delayed the second installment payment by a couple months. Some of the other counties took their payments. They had 2 and made it 4. They did different things depending on the county. Some of them just waived late fees for a certain point. It all depended. That was assistance specific to this year. Exemptions are a great question. Every county offers exemptions, and it's an important part of the tax understanding. If you own a house, if you live in a house and you own it, you're entitled to a homestead exemption, and that just removes some of your assessed value from your tax bill. In Cook County, it's $10,000 assessed value. In the collar counties, it's $6,000 assessed value. And that's equalized assessed value, which we can get into more later. But yes, there are exemptions. The things to note, there's a homestead exemption. So if you own it and live in it, if you're a senior above the age of 65 and you have the homestead exemption, then you're entitled to a senior exemption, which is additional relief. And then if you have those first two and you make less than $65,000 in a year for the household, then you get a senior freeze, which locks in that assessment for your property as long as you live there and continue to make less than $65,000 a year.
So I was going to ask you, so when you say household, so that's like if it's the mom, the dad, they're both over 65, but then you have maybe your 30-year-old son living there too. You're including the 30-year-old son.
Correct.
In that.
So his income is included in that. And so you have to report that, and that does right now. If we're consolidating households, it's a household income thing. The freezes are less helpful. But if you have just 2 people and they're getting Social Security, there's every chance it's less than $65,000 a year, and they can freeze their taxes.
Okay. All right. So,
The next one is about when you get a senior exemption, and that follows directly into this one. And it says, what are the steps to get the exemption? Cook County recently changed a lot of their exemptions. They have an online process now, which is very easy. You go online, there's a form. You can either fill out the form and submit it via mail, or you can do what they have a DocuSign online now. And the when is interesting. So if you have a homestead exemption already,
mhm.
and then let's say you own the home, whatever, you turn 65 this year, that's the year you can apply for your senior exemption. So it's interesting because a homestead exemption is based on if you lived there January 1st, whatever year it is. So for this year, if you bought a house this year, you don't get the homestead exemption next year because you didn't live in that property January 1st, 2020. So there's a delay in that. But the senior exemption is based on if you turn 65 that year. So then you file for the senior exemption that year, you submit your driver's license, and then they will apply that. And they've also recently passed a state law now to make it easier. So any senior and homestead exemptions, as long as there isn't a deed recorded or something like that, will be automatically renewed. You don't have to. They finally learned that once you turn age 65, we don't like Benjamin Button down, so you're going to keep staying above the age of 65. So we can automatically renew that one.
So once they apply, it's in place, and they don't have to worry about.
That is for the senior exemption and the homestead exemption. It's always good to check on it, and you can always check on it at any point going online. The senior freeze, because it requires an annual income statement, you have to renew that every year. And that's always done in the first quarter of the year, usually. Okay. And the senior freeze is important to just remember. And the reason they do that is mostly it's because if someone, has a random change of income or wins the lottery or something, they don't get to keep that freeze. So,
Oh, okay. So that's done every year.
A senior freeze every year.
Okay. All right. So here, the next question. Well, you know what? I mean, we can hop around a little bit because we can talk about how to appeal your taxes, or the next one, do you have to apply every year for a homeowner's exemption, which is, I think,
I say we just answered that, and that is again, that's new. That is very new because they just passed a law to do that. Now, the next question, we're going to skip that how to appeal, but we're going to go to the next one, which was the previous homeowner's exemption was taken off. The homeowner didn't realize it, and they have to apply and request the exemption. So when a property transfers, a lot of times people don't request their homestead exemption again. The problem being when you buy a house in 2020, in 2021, in the first quarter is when you fill out your homestead and you say, okay, I bought this house, no problem. But in 2021, they want to know who owned it January 1st, 2020, which is the person you bought it from, and they can't fill out that form anymore, even though the person you bought it from was probably entitled to that homestead exemption still. And that's kind of what the automatic renewal gets rid of. That there used to be a gap year where a lot of properties taxes would spike one year because the old seller wasn't able to, didn't fill out the forms, and the new seller filled them out, and they're like, oh, this person's not eligible for the exemption yet. And the automatic renewal kind of helps get through that. But if you've been, let's say, this happens all the time where people will not realize for 4 years the exemption fell off and it never got put back on.
Well, they bought an investment property or something like that.
Yeah, there wasn't an exemption at all. So in Cook County and Cook County alone, you can request certificates of error for your property, and you can go backwards and get your exemptions back as well. So you can go onto their Cook County Assessor's website, and they have a DocuSign portal. They just implemented it this year. It's great. You go onto their portal, you click through, you enter the information, you're going to sign your affidavit, you're going to upload a picture of your driver's license, and then you're going to repeat that process however long you've owned the house. And then it processes through the assessor, they confirm it, then they send it over to the treasurer, who then eventually cuts a check to you. And so that is in the collar counties. If you don't have your exemption, typically, best case scenario is if you're on top of it and call before that second installment is due, you can usually get your homestead exemption applied for that year and that year only. You can't go back more than the current billing, the year that you're being billed. And then they'll get it going forward as well, but you won't be able to go back, like in Cook County, you can go back 3 or 4 years, which is exclusive to Cook County.
But you can go back, but that's if you forget to do it, and then you only can go back as long as you lived in the home.
No,
right?
only in Cook County you can go back 3 or 4 years if you lived there those 3 and 4 years.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah, but in no other county can you go backwards at all. And I have people all the time who will own a house for 15 years and have never had an exemption, and it happens a lot. So they're doing. The assessor and the state, they're all trying to take steps with this automatic renewal, with the online portal. They're taking steps to make it easier. And that's, again, this sort of just providing information to people to know that it's out there.
So did they do all this also because of the COVID, the COVID?
All of this stuff has been in the works. This has all been in the works a long time. Like
even before that.
Some of this, like the automatic renewal of the exemptions and the senior, like the exemptions increasing, some of that started with the previous assessor. Like this has been stuff that's been rolling for a long time. It has to go through, and the new assessor put all this stuff online. He wanted to make things accessible and put it online. So that was him. But like the automatic renewal, that's just been a thing that's been working through and working through legislation like it does.
Well, let's talk here. Can anybody appeal their property taxes, or does it depend on the county, the township, etc.?
Any homeowner can appeal their house by themselves or with person. Anyone can appeal the taxes if you are the person responsible for paying them. So what that means is, if you are a commercial property and you're a tenant, but you pay all the property taxes, even if you're not the owner of the property, you can still appeal. If you're a residential property, if you're renting, but your lease says that you're responsible for the taxes and they're going to adjust your rental rate based on the taxes, and they don't appeal them, you can appeal them. You can also appeal taxes for a property you're under contract to buy. If you want to, yeah, because let's say you're under contract and there's a deadline, and the deadline's gonna, if you're confident, the appeal is gonna go through whether or not your transaction does. So that's the thing to keep in mind. And but yeah, you can, if you're the one who's going to be liable for those payments, you're under contract, because there's specific windows to appeal. And if you are under contract in that window and you close after that window, you don't want to lose your right to appeal just because you're going to close after the deadline. And you can just retain your right to appeal if the seller's not actively appealing, which happens.
So certain counties do it at certain times, and as far as deadlines, do you have?
So the deadlines run essentially year-round, depending on where you are. And I'll clarify that. And I'm actually going to clarify the last question too. The only other thing is, if your property is owned in an LLC, you have to, or a corporation, you have to have an attorney represent you. That is a rule across the whole state. So that's just, you said anyone can appeal, but a lot of people are I've plenty of clients who put their properties into LLCs or corporations for whatever purpose, and they cannot appeal on their own anymore. They need an attorney at that point. That's just a statutory rule. And then now, deadline wise, it is in Cook County, the assessor deadline window starts typically February or March, usually around February or March. And it goes right now till September, October. This year it's bleeding into November, obviously due to COVID. And then that's the assessor. And then in Cook County, the board starts typically in July or August with deadlines that roll through March or April. This year it might even go later. I don't know what's going to happen there. But so that's the whole, and then March or April, you're already into the next year's assessor. In the collar counties, they're almost exclusively open for appeal in the last half of the year. So All of Will County was only open for appeal in August and September. All of DuPage County, parts of DuPage County were open in July, August, September, and there's still parts that haven't even opened for appeal yet. So it really depends on where you are for your deadline, and it varies by county and then township within the county.
So what would you recommend? Would you recommend them contacting the township or the county to find out where their deadlines are?
If you want to find a deadline, it's the county. The township might have it too, but the county is the easiest location for finding your deadline. And like the Cook County Assessor's website has a detailed chart of the deadlines. The DuPage County Board of Review has a deadlines webpage. So does every other county has deadline web pages.
Okay. Now, did you want to go back to that? How do you appeal your taxes, or would you?
Let me see the next two real fast. If
you go to the village and give.
Let me see. Then the next. Okay, so we can do the next three questions. Kind of lead into each other. So how to appeal your taxes, and is there any way for a landlord to contest or appeal taxes? And if you go to a village and you submit and lose, why do attorneys win? So I can kind of explain all those in one just long answer. That bottom, the last question there is there any way for a landlord to contest or appeal taxes on a residential income property? They can absolutely do that. There's no difference. Residential income property is just treated as every other property. The only thing is they don't get their exemptions unless their lease states clearly that the tenant is responsible for the property taxes, and their taxes are built into their, if they have a specific language in their lease, then they can get their exemptions as well on the rental property. But a landlord can always appeal their taxes as well. A lot of landlords have LLCs. They need an attorney for that, but they can still appeal their taxes. And now, how to appeal your taxes? What you're doing is you're fighting one of two things for a residential property. You're fighting the market value of your home, or you're fighting the equity of assessment. And what that means is you're fighting your assessment with your neighbors and saying, okay, I have a 2,000 square foot house with a basement. I'm going to look at other 2,000 square foot houses with a basement in my neighborhood. And I'm going to say that those properties, for whatever reason, are assessed less than mine. I'm going to point that out to the assessor and ask for a reduction based on that. The other option is also the market, in which you say, you have my house, and this is 10. That's where that 10% comes in. You have my house assessed at $35,000, which is $350,000 market value. I just bought it for $300,000. You have overassessed my property, and you provide the evidence and show that and correct them. Or you refied your house, as a lot of people did this year, and they got an appraisal with that refi, and that appraisal says this house is worth $325,000. You can submit that appraisal as evidence. It's important to know, though, like, you don't want to, if you get a refi appraisal, your assessor's $35,000 assessed value, so your $350,000 market value. Your refi appraisal says $375,000. Submitting that to the assessor isn't going to do anything. It's going to say, great job, assessor, you're pretty close to the market value here. People don't sometimes realize the evidence they think they have. And the most important thing on how to appeal your taxes is don't look at tax bills. You're not appealing a bill. You're not appealing a final tax number. You're appealing that assessed value. The numbers that matter the most, all factors considered are relevant, like age and size and style. Neighborhood is huge, but it's important to look at the assessed value of the property per square foot, the building assessed value per square foot, and compare that with your neighbors. And then the market value, the total market value per square foot, and compare that with sales in your neighborhood as well. That's the biggest thing to lead into that next question, where people will go and give properties to use, and they'll submit an appeal and they'll lose because they don't realize what they're looking at. And I have a great example of a client who had a very large house in Inverness who submitted a full packet appeal to on their own with their they prepared a whole bunch of comps. They submitted this thing. They showed it to me the next year when they hired me, and they said, why didn't I get a reduction? I had all this evidence, and I reviewed the evidence, and it was a sales approach because they were submitting just recently sold properties in their neighborhood.
Mhm.
But what they didn't realize is they were looking at the wrong thing. They were just looking at sale prices and saying, well, the assessor's going to look at the market value per square foot. And when we did the math on it, they submitted 9 comparables, which is a lot. But the average, just like without even making any adjustments, the average was 10% higher per square foot than he was at. And so that's a bad start, you know, and you don't want to be making a ton of adjustments on comparables, obviously, because that, you know, makes them less valid. But that is the main reason is they'll look at a property down the street. It's the same model house as mine. Their tax bill is $6,000 and mine's $8,000. What's happening? But they're on a senior freeze, and people just don't realize that. And so they look at the tax bills, and they see that, and that happens all the time. Or people will also just not realize, like they say, that's the same house as mine, and they'll not realize that their house is 500 square foot bigger than that house, and that happens as well. And people will submit comparables and just not realize what they're submitting. And I do this all day, every day, and so do the other attorneys. And we also have access to a lot of data. And that's the other thing, because the biggest thing too is people won't realize that they have a neighborhood, according to the assessor, where a block away is a different neighborhood, even though it's a block away, but those are weighted less than your neighborhood, according to the assessor. And so that's really the biggest thing that happens when people will submit an appeal on their own and lose, and then an attorney comes in and does the work and wins.
So would you recommend them calling their realtor to get some comparables on their home?
Sometimes it's okay to do that, but again, like the market is, it can be, as long as people look at what the assessor has, and this is another great topic, is realtors look at what the listing shows. You know, oh, this was a 3,200 square foot house, and that's accurate. But the measurement that the assessor cares about is whatever the data they have. And sometimes that data doesn't match.
I was going to say it's wrong.
Exactly. And so that is a big issue, because we can't, you have to fix that. So most of the time, people don't go out of their way to fix it if the assessor has them too small. And that's just the truth, because that's in their benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, though, the assessor will have it too big, and then they will fix it the right way. And so getting comps from a realtor can be good, but as long as you look at the square footage that the assessor has. And the biggest thing too is basements. Basements, if it's fully finished, even like a walkout basement is not considered above ground square footage for the assessor. So that is a consideration, because you want to compare. If you have a walkout, you want to compare to other walkout basements. But if you're above ground, you don't count that as above ground living area in your total square footage. That's what the assessor has. So getting comps is great, as long as, and this is the weird area of just property taxes, is you have to look at the data the assessor has, because that's what they're going to use. And you have to play by their rules. So and you can correct your own, but it's much more difficult to just go out and say, my neighbor's house is bigger than what you have. That's a whole different process. But getting comps can be very helpful for an argument. If you want to go out on your own and try for an appeal, just make sure you look at the assessor's square footage when you're looking at those market values.
Does it matter bedrooms, bathrooms, or anything like that? Like a number of bathrooms that you may have in a home versus same house, but you put a bathroom in the basement or something like that, does that make a difference?
So that's a great question. There's kind of like the biggest factors that matter, and then there's like a bunch of factors below that matter, but they're weighted less so. So the biggest factor, neighborhood, okay? Style of the house. You want a split level compared to a split level. You want 2 stories to 2 stories, ranches to ranches, etc. The age within a couple years. You don't want to compare a 12-year-old home with a 200-year-old home. However, if you're the 200-year-old home and there's a 12-year-old home that's selling for less per square foot than they've got, that you can use it that way. That's fine. I would never, if I have a brand new construction, I wouldn't be going looking at anything more than 3 or 4 years old. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so age is relevant, style, neighborhood, and square footage. You want to be, the ideal is within 10%. You don't want to be, a 2,500 square foot house to a 3,800 square foot house, but 25 to 28, that's okay. And then things like basement is another big, like whether or not there is a basement is good. And then the finished or not kind of is a consideration, but not by any means a huge deal. Bathrooms is a consideration, but not the end of the world. It's things like the better your comparable are, the stronger your case is. And so if you have a property that's within 2% square footage, the same age, same number of baths, then you're walking in there with very good evidence. And that's what it is. It determines the strength of your evidence. And it really depends, because some neighborhoods you'll have a lot of very good comparables, but there are custom neighborhoods or just old neighborhoods where you have old and then knockdowns and new, and it starts to get your comparables get very convoluted, and you just do your best.
Do you, is location a factor? Being
the number one factor. Oh, you mean
like the location of your home? I'm by a shopping center, but then you have another house, same model, same square footage, and it's more more inside of the neighborhood versus next to a commercial building.
So typically the neighborhoods set by the assessor usually kind of group things for you, and you just try to and there are neighborhoods that are widely spread, but what they do is they kind of take the houses off major roads, like the houses that are on bigger roads that aren't in nested off into a neighborhood.
Right.
They group those together,
just
because that way they can compare them on a similar, what their neighboring is. And they try to make the assessor's neighborhoods, again, it's based on whatever they've set, but that is something that they try to consider and sometimes there's just unique properties, and you argue the best you can, because especially if you get out anywhere that's not in a neighborhood, then you just have you can have some very weird properties. You just do what you can to argue that the value is lower than or obviously you're always arguing for lower stuff when you're appealing your taxes. So
right, exactly, yes. So I think, did we go over everything?
That was all those, absolutely. That answered all those questions, I think.
Questions. Okay, great.
And
is there anything that you wanted to add?
I mean, really, I think anyone who has questions about property taxes should really just reach out to anyone to get help from whoever you can. Get your questions answered and try to demystify the situation, because that's what you want to do. You want to, you give Dawn a call and say, what's happening? Give me a call. I can help you out. It's important to try to answer questions, understand the process. And I always recommend reviewing your property for appeal, because it's one of those things where there's no harm, especially in Cook County. I don't know of any case in Cook County where they increase people's assessments due to an appeal. They typically never want to discourage people from appealing. In fact, they always want to encourage it, because it helps keep their system flowing. They let people correct the facts that way, and they see the mistakes in their algorithms. There's literally no downside to appealing, and I believe everyone should. they do it on their own. Contact someone like me who can help them out.
Mhm.
And I don't charge upfront, and there's lots of other firms that don't charge upfront as well. And so that is a way to kind of give it a try risk free. There are firms that charge upfront as well, and they'll explain that to you. But I always advocate for people to reach out to someone, get your questions answered about property taxes, and understand, especially if you're buying a property, just understand what you're getting into, and then appeal it, because maybe you save some money.
Yes, that's what it's all about, especially now. So, was there anything that you wanted to show, or
No, I mean, we basically covered
cover
everything, and so that kind of, I mean, I can run through, but it's already, we've covered pretty much everything. I will say everyone should appeal. Everyone should check their exemptions to make sure they're getting exemptions that they're entitled to. If you own a property and you live in that property, you're entitled to an exemption. If you're over 65, if you're a returning veteran recently left the service, there is an exemption for that. If you have a service-related disability, there are exemptions for that as well. If you have just a disability in general, there's an exemption for that. Check your exemptions and make sure you're getting what you're entitled to.
And I think who would you contact?
So to check your exemptions, you have to look at your tax bill. Okay. So you can look up your tax bill on most every county's treasurer's website. You just pull it up. I know in Cook County, the Cook County Treasurer, you can pull up your tax bill and it flat out has your exemptions, which ones you've been getting. It's got a yes and no chart. It'll tell you, and it's just a good way to see. Lake County, you can pull up copies of your tax bill very easily on their online site. You enter your address or your PIN or even your name, and then you can just literally pull a copy of your tax bill. It generates a PDF right there, and it'll show you exemptions, and a lot of them will be zero. Just notice that. DuPage County, same thing. You go online. All the counties, you can just see whether you're getting your exemptions. It's an online check. They all have different access portals, but I recommend just always checking for your exemptions if you own a house.
That is great information. Great information. So, if there's any questions that anybody may have, they can contact Ryan. And if you wouldn't mind just repeating your contact information so that everybody knows what it is, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. My name is Ryan Schaefges. My law firm is the Law Offices of Ryan Schaefges. My phone number is 847-403-1830. And my email is ryan@schaefgeslaw.com. And the spelling is at the bottom of your screen, but it's RYAN@SCHAEFGESLAW.com.
Great, great. So Ryan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have this Q&A session with me. I really appreciate it. And also, I just want to remind everybody else, now we still have time for people to enter in for that Halloween coloring contest. Just go to Dawn Block Realtor, click on that link that's the post pinned at the top of the link, and you can pick one of the art. I had 3 or 4 designs that you can pick from, color them, get them posted. It doesn't matter how old you are. My mom did one, so anybody, any age can do it. You're all winners. And then on Halloween night, 5 p.m., stay tuned. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live for the drawing for some winners, and they'll be getting some special gifts. So be sure to get your entries in. And if you have any questions, please get in touch with Ryan regarding taxes. If you have any questions about looking for homes, selling your homes, please give me a call. My number is 847-630-2121, and my information is also running across the screen. And everybody, I want you to make it a great evening, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next time I do a call. I'm your resource for real estate. Thank you, Ryan, for being a guest, and we'll be back another time with some more great real estate related information. Everybody have a great evening. Bye-bye.